Hello, on this episode of Random Fit, both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, are going to talk about periodization for life, not just for sport. Now, as a former strength and conditioning coach, I want you to know that periodization was all my job was about getting somebody ready to compete for the season. But I want you to know it's not just for athletes, it's for you.
Yes, and if we're going to go into detail about the NASM Optimum Performance Training model, where we will look at different phases and the way that you can change up your workout and think of it being something that's going to be scientifically backed, it's going to be safe, effective, and it's going to get you to those goals.
So listen to the episode, like, follow, subscribe, download, give us a 5 out of 5, and enjoy the show.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Welcome to this episode of Random Fit with both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller. Wendy, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing awesome. No complaints on my side, especially because we are talking about periodization. And when I say periodization, we're talking about periodization for life and not just for sport. So when it comes to the word periodization, if you are on the exercise science, strength and conditioning side of fitness, periodization, we know what that means, and it's just about changing things up. But what we want to talk about today, Wendy, I hope you're up for this as well, but we're going to talk about how do you periodize, if that's a word, for life. Well, yeah, we're not in football season. We're not in baseball. We're not in basketball. We're not in golf. We're not in softball. We're not just training to achieve a certain amount of strength, stability, and power for the year. But we are talking about periodization for your lifetime.
Well, and I think that's one of the unique things about the National Academy of Sports Medicine is we actually have a model to follow to help people continuously progress into their or to a certain goal, or as they go through the model over and over again and go through different phases of training, we're providing them a way of doing this safely, effectively, and efficiently. And that's one of the reasons I absolutely love this company and what it represents, is because as a trainer, even if you're brand new or if you're a fitness enthusiast and want to look into what NASM offers, there's this model that we have, and it's called the Optimum Performance Training model. And it is one of those stair-step type of models that has, I mean, technically, if you include corrective exercise and performance, it has 7 different phases. However, on the fitness side, we just say basically there's 5. And what we're trying to do is we, do assessments. Again, I say that all the time, but we try to build a very solid foundation. And what we have found is if we have a really strong foundation, that when we reassess, those compensations maybe that we saw in the assessment should no longer be there. And then what happens at that point, then we can change up the exercises that we're doing because we know that we're in a good spot, right? And then we can actually add more weight. We can get bigger if that's our ultimate goal. We can get stronger. This is where a lot of the strength really happens. And then, of course, if we want to really build like fast, and be powerful, then that's when we would go up the model. The one thing that ends up happening, though, is people walk in and maybe they haven't been in, and this is when we say not for just sport. So somebody that's like for life, if someone hasn't really been in the gym, they kind of fell off the wagon, if you will, and they've taken some time off. And then especially we always know what happens when the new year comes around. Like, this is my year. I'm going to get stronger. I want to look better. I want to feel better. They go to the gym and they go in for a couple different weeks, and they start to see some changes. They feel better. And then they just do the same thing over and over and over again. And once you start doing that same thing over and over again, your body starts to adapt to it. So there's 0 changes that are going to happen. They just basically becomes like, it's just one of those things where they work out, they go to the gym. I do the elliptical for 30 minutes on the same level, and I try to go faster. I'm lifting this amount of weight for this bicep curl and this exercise and this exercise and this exercise. And as a trainer, the first thing I say, Ken, I know you do as well, what are you doing differently? And the answer is usually nothing, because I saw all these gains in the very beginning. Why would I change what I'm doing? Because I know that it works, because it did allow me to have some changes. So how do you answer that?
I don't think I've answered that the same way, because it depends on context, right? So when we're talking about periodization, and it depends if I'm talking to, like you bring up the New Year's resolution, that person that's been, let's say, absent from the gym. But you also have those people that kind of start and stop. The people that come in, spring break is around the corner, summer is around the corner, or my kids are back in school, so now I have time. So they'll enter and exit fitness at different times. So from that standpoint, it's just talking to, knowing who's in front of you. But in the beginning, it is just about starting off. Got to get your foundation right, as you mentioned, Wendy. From the 5 phases, from stability, strength, into power. It is a stair-step model, meaning that you're only as powerful as you are strong. Again, as far as the width and the breadth of the foundation of the, I guess, the capacity is. So I can only move as fast as I am strong, and I can only move as much resistance as I can stabilize. And that's how I tell people, like, okay, if you're coming off of the holiday season and now you're trying to make changes because there are better things that you need to do with your body, just get body control first, and then we can go on to the progressive side. But this episode is not so much about programming per se, how many sets, reps, rests, exercises, or anything like that. But what we are talking about is, okay, getting started off on the right foot to lay the foundation for other things that you want to accomplish. And how do we oscillate between the phases as we go on? But everybody, and kind of like what we're saying right now, is that everybody enters and exits fitness different times for different reasons. And when it comes to your life, there's different timestamps in our lives when fitness and movement and exercise means something different. I think what we're really trying to do here, Wendy, is just really figure out, okay, well, how do I oscillate responsibly, move up and down the OPT model, as you so eloquently explained, about the 7 phases. How do we do that responsibly, but actually be more educated about what each phase means to each person, depending on where they are in their life? And I think one of the first thing, again, periodization is a technical term that has come about in the strength conditioning field. I think it started off in the strength conditioning field, and it's leaked its way. I mean, fitness is fitness, and program design is program design. But when we talk about, and the calendar, I think, is the easiest way to look at it. But if we're looking at micro, meso, and micro cycles, what we are talking about is trying to look at the 12-month, and then breaking that down into 4 to 6 weeks, or even if you want to think quarterly for you business-minded people. And then we're looking at the microcycle of 1 week. So you're basically taking an immediate, a short, and a longer-term view of how you want to change your programs. Because as you brought up, Wendy, like, you get those people that come in, they do the same thing day in and day out, or like that New Year's resolution person that comes in January, maybe even February. I think February has been kind of like the new start of the year for fitness. But try to find a treadmill or an elliptical in January and February, right?
Oh, I know.
And then
Ghost Town, no, February. It's Ghost Town after Valentine's Day.
Okay. Or even, try to find one in June. Yeah, you can throw a frisbee in the gym and not hit anybody, right? But that just shows you where, okay, people lose incentive to work out because they don't know what to do, because they've been doing the same thing. But if you are oscillating, changing your programming on a weekly, quarterly, and a yearly basis, taking the long view and intermediate view versus like you walk into the gym and then you just decide there on what you're going to do. And I think that's what we're really trying to figure out as far as, or trying to share our insights on how somebody can say, okay, well, maybe I do need to sit down with a calendar, piece of paper. Do people still sit down with a piece of paper, Wendy, and just kind of, or they get on their spreadsheet and just say,
I think it's more on the computer these days, but I think to your point, Ken, when we talk about periodization, Ken just said, is changing your program. And it's one of those things that if you are looking at the different cycles that he mentioned, such, as the macro cycle and then the mesocycle and the micro. So whether we're looking at it at 12 weeks, whether we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks, or whether we're looking at just 1 week at a time, you have to build that foundation first. And so it takes the body about 4 to 6 weeks to adapt to the demands that you're placing on it. And so when we talk about building that foundation, it's just like the foundation of your house, right? We want it to be strong. We want it to be stable. We want it to make sure that all our muscles are firing at the right time. And we've got all cylinders to go, meaning our posture is good. We don't have rounded shoulders or a forward head. Our feet are straight ahead. We're actually optimally lined up. So after 4 to 6 weeks, we ideally want to do a reassessment. We want to see, does our body move and look better? And then we can literally go on to building the strength. Well, think of if we have a good foundation and you have a strong house, thinking the house is the strength, then there are 3 different phases that we look at within that strength component. We start to do kind of a combo between stabilization and strength. And that's kind of our phase 2, because it's kind of what we call superset. And then we go into strength, like true strength, of looking at building size and building more muscle gain, if you will, and then max strength if needed. And then we get into the power, which I always on a house would say are the bells and whistles. It's the door frames, it's the couches, it's the inside fun stuff that everybody wants to start out doing. The biggest thing is if you're going in and you don't have a strong foundation and you start to work on power, then breakdown can occur. And so I think that the purpose of what we were hoping to get out of this episode was really trying to say, okay, if you're looking at your workout, do you have a plan? Or to your point, Ken, you're just throwing a bunch of things together. And if you're putting a lot of strain and stress on your body over time and you're not doing something called deloading, meaning you're not giving yourself some time to recover and rest, then you're going to eventually have overtraining or breakdown, which is what we're trying to avoid. So you've got to make sure that you have a plan and that the plan makes sense to whatever your ultimate goal is.
Yeah, and I think it's like, and I know we've mentioned this book many a times, right? The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the first step is begin with the end in mind. So when you know what you're trying to accomplish, start off with that and then work backwards. And just to give some perspective and kind of give some insight of things that usually come up, but not until later in the conversation, is when people say, when you do your intake, your client intake session, Wendy, the first session is, well, what is it you want to accomplish, right? But then as the conversation goes, they might say, I want to be stronger. I want to do this. I want to be able to run, do a marathon, half marathon, whatever it is. But correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but a lot of times the 9 times out of 10, the situation is like, I also don't want to get hurt, right? I want to be safe. I want to make sure I'm using good form, all for the sake of, okay, I don't want to get hurt. I want to be safe when I incorporate my exercise program. So when you talk about going through your calendar, and that big topic, I mean, it's bigger now than it's been in the past when you talk about deloading, right? So with exercise, it's really easy to put stress into the body. So when you brought up those 3 phases of strength training, right? So you have a little bit of strength endurance, a little bit of hypertrophy or putting on some muscle, and then how much can you bench? How much can you squat? That kind of max strength, those 3 different phases of training. Now what we are looking at is, okay, well, how do we work and operate at that high level? And Wendy, you brought up about 4 weeks within a phase of training. How do I operate at that high level without putting my body at risk for injury? And it's from that standpoint that we need to incorporate these deloading. And in the case of the training model that you and I both use when we practice with our clients and our athletes, is the fact that basically what we're talking about is stabilization training. How do we restore efficiency and stabilization when we've been using all those big muscles, right? The chest, the back, your glutes, your quads, because what you don't use, you lose, right? So if I don't use my rotator cuff, or I don't put emphasis on my rotator cuff, or my deep hip stabilizers, or my deeper spinal muscles, I'm going to lose their ability to control and stabilize my shoulders, my spine, and my hips. And if I lose that, then I am ultimately putting myself in a higher risk category for injury potential. So we can never say, so you're going to get hurt if you do this. But, you know, the body only has so much tolerance for operating at high levels of intensity when it comes to volume and weight. And even as you mentioned, Wendy, when it comes to power training, the bells and whistles, your body can only operate at that high level for so long before the stresses can compound, and now we start putting our joints at risk for injury. So that deloading, if we're going to talk about periodization for our life, we don't put enough emphasis on taking stress out of the body. We're really, 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 really good at putting stress into the body, but how often do we pay attention to taking stress out of the body? And that's one of the first things that needs to be added or strongly considered when it comes to, okay, what am I going to do this month, next month, or next quarter, or at what points in the year can I implement deloading strategies to help me maintain the stability I need to move safely and efficiently?
I think you make some great points. I'm actually going to piggyback off of that. But before I do, I want to say that this episode of Random Fit is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources, get the Edge app to schedule and program clients, enjoy half off all certifications and specializations, access free CEUs, and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. Ken, I think it's important too, when you were talking about that, to realize that when you are looking and making your plan, yes, it's extremely important to think about deloading and everything, but then also doing periodization within the phases that you've kind of advanced into. So, for example, if you've spent a lot of time, your 4 to 6 weeks or so in stabilization, of course, always doing different exercises that are focusing on tempo and repetition and proper posture and alignment. Then you go into strength. Then maybe when you're looking at it from week to week, you might do, if you're working out 3 times a week, you'll do 2 in strength and 1 in stabilization, just to make sure everything is back into alignment. And then as you progress, you always just kind of go down and revisit some of the lower levels within your week, but you don't want to really go above and beyond that. So you don't want to be in power and then, just one day because you're having a bad day and you want to throw heavy stuff and lift really heavy, because that's when you said is really unsafe. So I think that's one of the main key components that we want to keep in mind. And I think it's extremely important.
Totally. And the other side, again, I think I don't want to think about backtracking, but I am going to backtrack a little bit. I don't want to scare anybody. And it sometimes sounds like it, Wendy, when I say you got to watch when you're in, hypertrophy phase, when you're trying to put on muscle. You got to watch when you're getting under, a 5 rep or 1 rep max. I don't want to scare people to not go into these phases, because we want to. Right, especially as we get older. Again, what we're talking about today on this episode is periodization for life, not just for sport, on Random Fit with both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller. But what we are talking about is, okay, we want to be at those intensities. We need to be at those intensities, because as we get older, we want muscle density. We want bone density. And the way you get bone density is by applying stress to the skeletal structure, right? So it's not just about elliptical where there's no impact, or swimming, great cardio, but no impact, right? So these aspects of our lifespan that we want to make sure that we have enough reservoir of muscle density, bone density, strength, and power, because as we age, those components, as much as we try, they're going to start to fade. It'll decrease faster in those that don't work out, but it'll decrease slower in those that do. So I don't want to, so when I talk about watch out for injury potential this, injury potential that. But what I want to say is that we need to be up there. We need to go up into those higher levels of the optimum performance training model. We need to have that intensity. We need to have that volume. But we also need to be able to unload and take the stress out of the body. So I think that's the bigger point that I wanted to make when it came to, okay, let's look at this week, this month, the next quarter, and let's look at the year and see where we can plot these sessions appropriately throughout the year. Because, it, like we said in the beginning, as we age, there's different timestamps, there's different life events, and we have to plan for them when we can. Because face it, Wendy, I mean, I'm at that middle age. I'm in my 50s, and now it's like, you know what? 60. I'm knocking on 60's door. 70 is right around the corner from that, and then, I kind of future think myself into, okay, where am I going to be when I'm 80 and 90? What I want to be able to do. Yeah, I want to be able to lift a jug of milk or walk up the stairs, and that requires me to be as strong as I can be today and as powerful as I can be, so that what's really easy now is somewhat easy, if not at least less challenging 30, 40 years down the line.
So Ken, let me ask you, if I had, a mom that comes in, she's a busy parent, what do you say to that client who is like, I just feel like I can't fit it all in? So can you provide like a practical example? Because I think sometimes it's easier if you have an example based on like some of your clients. So how do you answer that? Because I try to shorten it, but also make it more multi-joint and total body.
Yeah. Let me ask you, is this busy parent in the workforce, or are they working from home? Are they going in office? Give me that scenario.
Let's say that they're working from home.
Okay. Work from home, not that much easier because you still, like right now, we're recording this behind the computer. I'm still sitting down. So busy parent working from home. So here's the scenario. Again, Wendy, you might relate. You drop off your kid at school, right? So there's a hard stop in the morning and a hard stop in the afternoon, because the chances are if you drop off, there's going to be a pickup, or at some point where you have to address your child or children. But then, like right now, we have set a time for us to be behind the computer, behind the screen, behind the camera, right? And for a lot of people, that's what their day is. I have a couple clients like that. They have to be behind the computer at a specific time. So they're time precious. They may have small pockets of time. Now, again, looking at what inventory they have at home regarding exercise equipment, I might say, okay, well, if you have basic bands, which you can get on, go to the store or order online, light, medium, heavy resistance, dumbbells, you don't need a whole lot of weight, especially if you have bands. But as you just mentioned really quickly there, Wendy, we are talking about, okay, let's do some compound multi-joint movements. This might be modified burpees, right? I don't expect anybody, again, with the stipulation that they've earned their way to these exercises I'm about to mention. Mountain climbers, compound movements, right? So every part of your body is doing something. So in a mountain climber, you're in a push-up position. You're driving your knees up and down towards the shoulder and back into that plank position. So they might start off with modified mountain climbers, if not the full traditional kind of jogging pace mountain climbers. You might do, as I mentioned, modified burpees. So it may not be the jump your feet to your hands and then stand up and then jump to the ceiling. It might be just straddle step right, straddle step left, stand up, reach up towards the sky, reach down towards your toes, walk your feet back. That's a great compound movement. I love that exercise, actually, Wendy, because you're changing elevation, right? Because there's energy that you need to get from the floor to reaching up as high as you can. Different thing, bear crawls. Bear crawls are great. And all you need is basically the ability to crawl 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. So you take those 3 exercises, It can be as high or as low intensity as you want. And you do a round of 10 reps each, right? And you're between meetings, gets the heart rate up. You're not too sweaty. So if you have to be in front of the camera, you're still going to be presentable. As my client has told me, it's like, I just do one round of 10, gets my blood flowing, gets my hips out of this fixed position, get my heart rate a little bit. And we've done an episode on exercise snacks, right? Movement snacks, something where it's just a short bout, 1 to 2 minutes. You sit right back down, and there you go. So again, you're a working parent, start and stop with the kids, intermittent meetings throughout the day. You don't have, and the scenario really is, you don't have the traditional 45 to 60-minute block of time to dedicate to exercise. So all we're really talking about right now is just parceling out and piecemealing these movement sessions throughout the day. So one session may be dedicated to mobility, another one may be, quick, walk around 3 blocks in your neighborhood, and then another one more mobility based, and another one just more about what I just brought up with the bear crawl, mountain climber, burpee, and then do that 3-4 times during out the day without one solid section of 45-minute exercise bout. You might have 3-4 sessions of 5 to 10 minutes, which on the grand scheme of things is better than nothing.
Better than nothing. That is for
better
sure.
Than nothing. Yeah.
And, I always try to put things, looking at it in a practical standpoint, because I do get some people that walk in and say, listen, I can't make it to the gym every day. I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I also work. My kids are at home, and there's just a lot going on. And as a mom who was working from home with a one like infant, it was hard for me to find balance and juggle and figure things out until we learned that you could actually use in my case, my son as weight. And then it actually worked out pretty well for me. And he had a good time doing it. So there's just the main part, the reason why I asked you that question is I think sometimes we don't feel that people are scared of change, right? No one likes change. Change is scary, but you want to think when you're looking at fitness and you're looking at the prepping your body in the gym the right way, that you want to make sure that you're progressing your workouts at a level that your body is ready to do. And Ken and you and I have done different podcasts on the importance of the central nervous system and our brain and the way that it affects our body and our muscles and our joints and recruiting the right muscles at the right time. Well, this is one of those things that if we are focusing on proper movement patterns, we actually build that foundation, look at the 5 phases, we reassess every 4 to 6 weeks, we change it up. If you utilize something that's scientifically based and backed, which the OPT model is, so the NASM model that we're talking about is, that you're going to be able to do things on a safe standpoint. But the beauty of it is looking at the rep range and the tempo. So when you're looking to start 12 to 20 repetitions at what we would call like a 4-2-1 count, meaning that if I was doing that bicep curl I talked about, you'd come up for 1 second, hold for 2, and go down for 4. And you would do that anywhere between 12 and 20 reps. 20 if you're only going to do 1 set, 12 if you're going to do 2 or 3 sets. And you can blend that in. So vary up your exercises. Ken, you and I have done exercise selection of doing what we call a vertical load. If you want to do fat loss, you want to burn more calories, and you're really looking to do that, after you've done your warm up and stretches and foam rolling and all of that, then do an exercise for your chest, your back, your biceps, your triceps, your legs, whether it's the quads or the hamstrings or even your calves. Take minimal rest in between those and then repeat it. And then again, very slow, controlled movement patterns. And if you do that anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, I usually say 4 weeks, see how you feel, see how you're moving, then progress into something different. Just vary it up. So if you're looking at your weekly workout, is it something that's repetitive? Is something that it's different? Is it something that's going to challenge the body? And does it make sense? And as long as you answer like all of this is going to be good, then you're on a really good path. And I think, the big takeaway that I have isn't that periodization has to be complicated. It doesn't have to take away exercises that you like, but just know that if you like to do the same things every time you go into the gym, your workout will become very stagnant. You're not going to see a lot of changes. So think about those exercises that you love, and then think, how can you vary it up? And it could be just, instead of utilizing dumbbells, you're utilizing cables. And instead of always doing stuff with no weights, maybe you're adding smaller weights. Maybe you're doing things like you said,
Right.
your base of support. That's super important. So just change it up, have fun with it, but don't do the same thing over and over again. You're going to start to overtrain if you do power all the time. If you do a HIIT workout all the time,
Right.
you're going
Right.
to see yourself fatigue. You're going to see yourself start to kind of break down. You don't want that. So if you do a HIIT workout, maybe the next day is a stabilization workout. You just have to change it up.
Yeah, and I think people want to see progress, but I think we need to keep the mindset that progress isn't about doing more. You're not lifting more, doing more sets, more reps, more intensity, whatever the situation is. It is about doing the right amount at the right time, right? So if you've done some strength stability, and then now it's time to progress, right? And then we can get into, like you said, muscular development, max strength, get into power. But we also have to keep the door open to that. You know what? Maybe today, in that example of that busy parent, Wendy, I have my client, and I have to check in with him because physically sometimes he has a good day, and then sometimes, those are the days that we stick to the plan. And then there's those days where he's just not feeling it, right? His hip has a little something, his shoulder has a little something. And then that's when we do that stabilization training. So from that standpoint, we just need to, keep the idea that when it comes to periodization, the idea of keeping different levels of intensity for the purpose of achieving different adaptations, meaning you're stable, you're strong, and you're powerful. But sometimes you may have to change things up. And that's, as a strength coach, I found myself doing that more often than not when it came to, okay, well, the team had a tough 3 days, so I'm not going to go with our max strength session today. And we need to take the same approach with ourselves and our clientele as a personal trainer, or you as an exercise enthusiast, if you're listening to Random Fit here for your own personal gain and improvement. But sometimes, you don't have to stick with the plan if your body is telling you otherwise, right? So if you didn't sleep well, you had a longer meeting than anticipated, you sat down a little bit longer than you wanted, you didn't get your movement snacks in the other day as you had planned. So maybe today is that day for the movement snacks. But hopefully we've enlightened you, the listener of Random Fit, on some ideas on how we can periodize, change your workout plan throughout the year, or conceptually plan out how you're going to change your workout plan throughout the year. But also keep in mind that between stability, strength, and power, you need to go through all the phases to get all the adaptations. Once you got it, try and keep it, but do what you can to, make the changes that the body wants and needs. So Wendy, thank you very much for your insights, as always.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So for those of you listening to both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller here on Random Fit, thank you so much for your time and attention on this episode where we're talking about periodization for life, not just for sport. So like, follow, subscribe, download, give us a 5 out of 5 stars if you can, when you can. But let us know what you want to talk about on future episodes of Random Fit, and we will get that on a future episode for you. So until next time, everybody, thank you, take care, and be well.